Hello, I'm Nick and this is Conrad.
AKA Cheese 118.
Yeah. Anyhow, for all our lives, we have wanted to review Doctor Who. And now we are! And that's our life story. Roll the credits.
Okay, for our first review ever, we are reviewing The Three Doctors. This first aired 30th of December 1972 to the 20th of January 1973. It was to celebrate the first 10 years of Doctor Who being on our television screens. So what does this story with the first three Doctors have to offer? Well, let's take a look.
The Three Doctors and 30th. I was supposed to say this.
The Three Doctors is about a Time Lord called Omega, who is trapped in an antimatter universe which he created by his own will after he got stuck in a black hole. He wants to escape and chooses a doctor to help him, so using power from Gallifrey he sends an antimatter creature to get the doctor. The doctor calls for help, but the Time Lords don't have much power, so they break the first rule of time and send the doctor's past to help him. Does the story work then? Well, yes. Bob Baker and Dave Martin have written a magnificent script together, and they bring out the best in every main character. They also created, in my opinion, one of the best Doctor Who villains ever, because of how human he is, but also how mad and crazy he can also be. They've also managed to work the Three Doctors perfectly into the script while not making it too confusing at the same time. This is how you do a multi-Doctor story.
Now please don't get me wrong, I love the other multi-Doctor stories. Seriously, I love them. I've got the 5 Doctors here, and the 2 Doctors, both starring Patrick Troughton. But my problem with the other ones, they were kind of unimaginative. They both used already created monsters. Like in the 5 Doctors, they're like, let's have a Dalek in there and a Cyberman. That's what every fan likes. Well, the Three Doctors was more inventive. And they created an entire new bad guy, which everybody likes.
Okay, now I'm going to move on to the visual of the story. Seriously, it's brilliant. The locations are wonderful to look at. There's so many different places to see. I think the place I love most though is the antimatter world. The rock parts with grass here and there just give it some kind of new world feel. But I also like Omega's palace or place with all the bubble like walls. They're great. It gives it kind of the antimatter touch.
I like the outside because it fits the story. It's underdeveloped. And Omega never really goes up. We never see him exit his domain. His domain's all nice, shiny floors, sparkly walls, bubbles. But outside, which he never goes to, he just leaves. He can't be bothered to make it beautiful. He just leaves it as it is. And that's why I like it, because it fits the story.
Now, the costumes are great. They fit the Doctors perfectly. But the one I like most is Omega's. His mask gives me the kind of creeps. It's got just so emotionless, but not in a Cyberman way. Also how his cape is like the Time Lords back on Gallifrey in this episode. I think that's a really nice touch. I also like the deformed Mr. Blobby creatures, because they're different than any other monster beforehand. And they really look nice with the outside background. Just the red bubbles kind of go really well with the white rock and the grass. I just really like those. I'm not sure what to call them, so we'll call them Mr. Blobby creatures. Deformed. The one thing I didn't like, though, was the antimatter blob. It's poor graphics. Even for those times, they could have done better. It's creepy at first, but as soon as it's kind of out, it's just a blob with an attitude. I would have preferred the deformed Mr. Blobby creatures to have taken the Doctor to the antimatter world. I just think they were much cooler.
Well, I think the looks look very hit and miss. While the costumes are very good, the effects and set are okay at best. I mean, the unit set's good, but that's been established throughout 2 years, and of course, Doctor Who goes to an exciting new world, the antimatter world, aka another quarry! A stunning location which plays classic Doctor Who stories. But perhaps the most glaring part of the presentation is the Omega Gloop, which looks abysmal, but you've already touched on that. But then again, this is a 70s TV show, and the budget wasn't that high, so it can be forgiven. And the director does a very good job, and the explosions are impressive. Anyway, on to the acting, which for the most part is very good. John Pertwee, one of the blander doctors in comparison to the others, does a good performance, trying to be controlling and mature than his other self, the second Doctor. He does a wonderful performance. I've always enjoyed his portrayal of the Doctor, and he stepped back into it as if he never went away. Although, I don't think the writers got his personality perfectly. I mean, when he's trying to see how far Omega would go, he didn't accomplish anything. When he was the second Doctor, he always knew what he was accomplishing, and had everything already planned out in advance, logically. Meanwhile, here, I think he didn't know what was going to happen next. But the interaction between the second and third Doctor made this story. Both are in character when talking to each other, and the arguments reflect on the fact that the Doctor keeps changing, not only in personality, but in strategy to a situation as well. The second Doctor tries to make fun of Omega to find his weaknesses, and wasting time while he's trying to think of a way to stop him. Meanwhile, the third Doctor is more subtle, and tries to take Omega out of it, while keeping things calm until the situation gets bad, and he uses science to get out of it. But when they're being nice and working together later in the story, it shows another part of the Doctor. That when a situation gets really bad, he can work with pretty much anybody, with a bit of motivation. William Hartnell plays the Doctor very well, considering what he's going through. It's a shame he wasn't the main part of the action, but it's better than nothing. And he always seems to be one step ahead of everybody else in terms of what's going on and what's going to happen next. In terms of companions, Joe Grant in the story is annoying! And doesn't act anything other than making very unconvincing shock noises, crying, and hugging Sergeant Benton like a teddy bear. The Brigadier is very good in this story, as he is in most stories he's in, putting funny lines. I really believed his shock from the expression on his face the first time he enters the TARDIS, and the first time he finds the second Doctor. Although the Brigadier consistently asking questions on the Doctor's appearance, while can be entertaining, gets a bit annoying after a while. Sergeant Benton I enjoyed in this story, although I think he's a little too fast to accept most of the stuff that happens in this story. Although it does take a moment to question the TARDIS and the creatures for the first time, not much else. And he spends the rest of the episode hugging Joe. And the villain. Omega is one of the coolest the series has ever had. His morals, while at times a bit unjustified, are deep. And at times I really felt for him, being shunned out by his people who he had created time travel for. But all the years of being stuck there had worn off on him, in more ways than one. At first he wanted freedom, then revenge on the Time Lords. He knew he had to be stopped, because it endangered the universe, but you can see why it happened, and to an extent relate to him. And just the sheer power and impact he's making on everything makes him a great villain. Also, the great, booming voice screams, POWER! Now, the episode wouldn't be complete without some side characters, and let me tell you, they're very hit and miss. Dr. Tyler, the most prominent side character, is good at first. The actor does a good job of bringing him to life as the experienced scientist who helps out by showing you the recent readings his equipment picked up, and he's very likeable. But when we get to the antimatter world, he gets annoying, consistently asking questions, and was at one point willing to jeopardize the whole plan so he could escape, and doesn't do much else throughout the rest of the story. The only other character to step onto the antimatter world is Mr. Ollis, who really doesn't do much other than being the story's damsel in distress in a sense, being the first reason they investigated the matter in the first place. The only thing he does is stop the Brigadier from charging at the blobby monsters. And having a funny moment with Mrs. Ollis right at the end. I think the actor does his best, even though he doesn't do that much. The Time Lords, who are panicking because of huge power losses, really tried to help, to the extent of breaking the first law of time to get all three doctors to assist. And I think for the most part, the main two Time Lords do a fairly convincing job to emulate this. But I would like to point out that the old timer at the desk, who took the Doctor out of their timeline, does a very bad performance, which comes out flat and no real emotion put into it. And considering he gets about 2 lines, that's pretty bad.
So, later on, in The Three Doctors, the Doctors find out that Omega has no physical appearance, only his mask and clothes are keeping him there. Omega can never leave the antimatter universe. This is a pretty horrible concept. After all he has done to try and escape, he finds it was all for nothing. The Doctors make an escape back to unit headquarters when Omega makes a terrifyingly loud scream about finding out he had no physical form. Soon as the Doctors arrive back in the TARDIS, they get taken back to Omega's domain. They will hide in the TARDIS and make a plan. Something to do with the force field. Until they find the second Doctor's recorder in the force field generator. The Doctors go out and confront Omega. Omega tells them that if he has to stay there forever, so will the Doctors. The Doctors agree. But Omega has to let the rest of the gang home first. Omega agrees reluctantly. And after Joe making a scene of wanting to stay with the Doctor, they all leave. The Doctors then get the force field generator out and tells Omega to take it. Omega gets angry and knocks it out of the Doctor's hands. It then cuts back to unit where everybody lands in their place. The TARDIS appears and the two Doctors emerge happy and joyful. They explain that the recorder had been in the force field before they had entered the antimatter universe. This means it stayed matter. So when it fell out of the force field, the antimatter and the matter destroyed each other, and a supernova happened.
Wait a moment. So, the three Doctors defeated Omega by the recorder falling out the force field. But before they went looking for the force field, they had another plan to do with the force field generator. What was that plan? Guess we'll never find out.
Anyway, the Time Lords back on Gallifrey get a new power source from the supernova that the antimatter and the matter caused. It cuts back to Earth, where the Doctors all part back to their own timeline. The Doctor explains to Joe that they gave Omega his only freedom: death. Even for a villain, that's a pretty horrible thing to happen. After all he wanted to do was get out of the universe. Yes, he wanted to have revenge and everything, but for your only escape from something to be death is a pretty horrible concept. Anyway, the Time Lords send the Doctor a new dematerialization circuit, so he has full control over the TARDIS again. But he isn't going to leave just yet, because he needs to build a new force field generator.
So, Omega's defeated by recorders, is he? Recorders rule!
So, The Three Doctors, in my opinion, is a John Pertwee must-see. I'm glad they kept it as a 4-parter, as I think if it was any longer it would have ruined the specialness of the episode, but if it was any shorter it would have ruined the build-up. Sometimes there were some slow parts, but they quickly picked up, and I think Bob Baker and Dave Martin should be proud of what they have written for the 10th anniversary of Doctor Who. The ending is great because the Doctor can now finally freely travel in time and space. I do hope Omega will never be used again. Oh. I give The Three Doctors 8.5 out of 10 because it's perfect for the occasion in every way, but sometimes it can be a little slow.
I give this episode an 8 out of 10 because the pacing is great, the acting for the most part is amazing. The only thing that lets this episode down are some bad effects, some bad side characters, and cardboard sets.
Overall, the 10th anniversary is still the best anniversary special so far. The great acting between the Doctors makes this story the best treat for fans, and the villains are perfect to mark 10 years of Who. Thank you for watching our review of the 3 Doctors. Hopefully we will have new reviews up soon. If you would like us to review your favourite classic or new Doctor Who stories, then comment below. Thanks again, and goodbye.